We're here with Happy Times in Noisy Village. We're already on chapter 10. We're making our way through this book. This chapter is called Pontus Goes to School. Remember that Pontus was the baby lamb from the last chapter? Carl used to tease me and always say, "But it would be better to have a dog than a lamb." Olaf agreed with him, of course, because he has a dog himself. "Naturally, it's better to have a dog," Olaf said. "Why, may I ask?" I said. "Well, for one thing, you can take a dog with you wherever you go," Olaf said. "All Pontus does is run around in the sheep pasture," Carl said. "But a lamb is much cuter," said Anna to help me out. "A lot of good that does you," Carl said, "when he only runs around the pasture." One morning, after we had been talking about this the day before, I went, as usual, to the sheep pasture and called Pontus. When he came running, he looked so cute that I thought I wouldn't trade him for 1,000 dogs. I also thought it was a shame that he ran around in the sheep pasture all the time with no one to see how cute he was. Then I thought about Skip. Sometimes he follows Olaf to school. That's why Olaf said that dogs go everywhere with you. And once Miss Johnson let Skip come into the schoolroom and lie on the floor by Olaf's desk. But with poor Pontus, it was quite different. He had to stay in the sheep pasture all day. While he drank his milk, I thought about how unfair it was that dogs were allowed to go everywhere, but not lambs. By the time Pontus had finished his milk, I had decided to let him come to school with me. It's always hard for me to get ready in time for school when I have to go out and feed Pontus first. And on the morning when I was going to take him to school with me, I was so far behind that all the other children stood waiting for me outside Olaf's gate. "Hurry up, Lisa," Britta called, "or we'll be late." Then I turned around and said to the lamb, "Hurry up, Pontus, or we'll be late." Never have I seen any children look as surprised as they did when they saw Pontus. "Where is he going?" said Carl. "To school," I said, "and then perhaps we won't have to hear any more that only dogs can go places." "Lisa, are you quite sure that you're not feeling sick?" said Carl. "Do Mommy and Daddy know about it?" Bill said. When Bill asked that, I got a little worried because it was something I hadn't thought about. But Anna clapped her hands and laughed and said, "Why shouldn't lambs be allowed to go along to school as well as dogs?" And all of a sudden, Carl started to smile, and he said, "Let him come along. Miss Johnson will probably faint." So then we trotted down the hills, all of us, Pontus too. Sometimes he stopped as if he wondered if this was really all right. I'll show you a picture of them. To walk with Pontus to school. Sometimes he stopped as he wondered if this was really all right. But then I called, "Pontus!" and he said, "Bah," very sensibly and came along behind us. It took us a little longer than usual to get to school, and we were late. The bell had already rung, and the other children had gone in. Pontus stumbled going up the school steps, so I had to help him a little. "Perhaps he isn't mature enough for school yet," Carl said. When Carl first started to school several years ago, he couldn't sit still a minute. So Miss Johnson said that he wasn't mature enough for school yet and sent him home. She said that he could come back the next year, but first he had to play at home a little longer. Carl has never forgotten this. That's why he said that about Pontus. Britta knocked on the school door and we went in. I'm sorry we're late, said Britta. As soon as she had said it, Olaf started to giggle as if someone were tickling him. My, but you seem happy today, Olaf, said Miss Johnson. Pontus stood in the back where no one could see him, but of a sudden he said a little bah and stuck his head between my leg and Carl's. All the children jumped out of their seats. Miss Johnson did too, for that matter. What in the world? She said. You don't mean that you've brought a lamb to school? Lisa, Bill started, but then he was quiet because he was afraid Miss Johnson would get mad. I was beginning to get a little scared myself. Because we're studying about domestic animals, I said. I thought perhaps. What did you think? Asked Miss Johnson. That it would be a good thing for the class to see a real lamb, I said. But I really hadn't thought about it until just that minute. Miss Johnson started to laugh like everything, and all the children too, especially Olaf. He laughed until he almost choked. Then we took Pontus up to Miss Johnson's desk, and all the children were allowed to come and pet him. We read about sheep in our nature study book. And I told him how I had raised Pontus with a bottle. Everyone liked him so much, and we sang Ba Ba Black Sheep to him. I think Pontus himself was getting tired of all the noise and wanted to go back to the sheep pasture. But he was good and stayed very still beside my desk during the rest of the lesson. Well, sometimes he took a few small leaps and baaed. Every time he did, Olaf started to laugh, so that all the other children had to laugh too. When the weather is warm and sunny, we always eat our sandwiches on the school steps during lunch hour. We did that day. As usual, I had brought milk in a bottle, so I gave it to Pontus in a bowl I had borrowed from Miss Johnson. Anna gave me half of her milk so that I wouldn't be without any. Afterwards, Pontus ran around the schoolyard. Once he started nibbling a few of the carrots that were starting to sprout in Miss Johnson's vegetable garden, but I chased him away from there and told him that he'd have to calm down until he got home. When school was over and we were going home, Carl said, Tomorrow we are going to study about cattle. That'll be fun, and I'll bring the bull. Then Olaf laughed until he got the hiccups. But it might be a little crowded to have him next to my desk, Carl said. Miss Johnson had said that now we had brought enough live animals to school. It could be a help when you were studying about them, but it would be pretty confusing in the long run, she had said. Pontus got tired on the way home, so we took turns carrying him up the hills. Then we all went to take him to the sheep pasture. Never have I seen a lamb jump as high as Pontus did when we let him go. He galloped over to the other sheep and baaed so that you could hear him all over the pasture. It's quite clear that he isn't mature enough for school yet, Carl said. And that is the end of chapter 10. We'll see you next time for chapter 11. Thanks.